I don't want to get into all the vile and irresponsible and stupid things our alleged future president and his gaggle of scumbags chose to say during our darkest and most terrifying hour. The fact that they chose to attack our firefighters, who apparently aren't white enough to be out there risking their lives on our behalf, is...
Oh, we are back on Tim Pool's Timcast IRL, and as you can see, Tim and his boys are looking at a clip of Jimmy Kimmel, who is very emotional, doing his introductory monologue on his show. And, of course, he attacks Donald Trump because, over something which Donald Trump did not say. You know, first of all, he calls Donald Trump and his gaggle of scumbags. I guess that's the new word for deplorable in Jimmy Kimmel's mind, the deplorables. And he, you know, says that Donald Trump doesn't think the firefighters are white enough, which, of course, is not at all. I'm sure he did not say that. I don't know what quote Kimmel's referring to, but clearly he's referring to people on the internet, many people, including myself, who have seen various clips coming out of LA where they're all boasting about how their firefighter, you know, the firefighting crews, the chief of the LA fire department, boasting about how one of their top priorities is to make the LA firefighter squad more diverse and have more women. That's a really important thing, to have more women firefighters. And we've all seen that clip of that one, you know, lesbian, fat black lesbian lady saying that it's very important when you go in to rescue somebody from a fire, like she's ever done that, that the person being rescued sees a firefighter who looks like them, who represents them. Yeah, I think if you haven't seen that clip, look for it. It's pretty outrageous. No, I think most people, if they're caught in a fire, they just want somebody competent to come. That's all, somebody competent. And then, was that the same one who also said, that same black fat lesbian woman who said that, you know, somebody said to her that you wouldn't be able to get to rescue my husband from a fire. And, you know, the sassy firefighter replied, well, your husband shouldn't have got himself into that position in the first place. Yeah, people are pretty outraged about that. That's like the very definition of DEI hires, affirmative action hires. So yeah, there has been a lot of talk about that, and it is outrageous, and people, you know, heads should roll, basically. People should be held accountable. Resignations should be tender. People should be fired, going all the way up to the governor of California. But let's get into it, see what Tim Pool and his guys have to say.
Story from Mediaite to kick things off. Jimmy Kimmel breaks down over the fires and bitterly condemns Trump and his, quote, gaggle of scumbags, saying firefighters aren't white enough. Well, as everybody who watches this show knows, we've never criticized firefighters for not being white enough. We've criticized them for not hiring enough firefighters because they don't want white ones, which is totally different. And I assume the gaggle of scumbags comment has to be the supporters of Donald Trump, prominent personalities who have been criticizing DEI policies. But let me play the clip for you. And I'll start by saying I can give Jimmy respect. I'm not going to rag on him for crying over the fires. I mean, maybe an adult man shouldn't be crying like this, fine, but it is terrifying and people are losing their lives. So I can respect anybody who's emotional about this. Here's a clip.
As you know, it has been a very scary, very stressful, very strange week here in LA, where we work, where we live, where our kids go to school. We are back in our studio, which we had to evacuate on Wednesday. That's our building right there, the El Capitan. That is how close this fire was to our theater here. Many of us had to leave our homes in a hurry. Some of our coworkers lost their homes. That's Hollywood. It's been terrible. It's been a terrible. Everyone who lives in this city knows someone, most of us, multiple people, families, friends, colleagues, neighbors whose houses burned down. And the truth is, we don't even know if it's over. We had 100-mile-per-hour winds fueling this nightmare. As of tonight, the winds are back. And I think I speak for all of us when I say it has been a sickening, shocking, awful experience, but has also been, in a lot of ways, a beautiful experience because once again, we see our fellow men and women coming together to support each other. People who lost their own homes were out volunteering in parking lots, helping others who lost theirs. And tonight, I don't want to get into all the vile and irresponsible and stupid things our alleged future president and his gaggle of scumbags chose to say during our darkest and most terrifying hour. The fact that they chose to attack our firefighters, who apparently aren't white enough to be out there risking their lives on our behalf, it's disgusting, but it's not surprising. Instead, I want to focus on thanking those men and women, because that's all we should be doing right now.
We got to do it. We got to call out the lies on the corporate press.
Yes.
Okay? First of all, let me say, who's his gaggle of scumbags? He's not talking about his administration, because none of these people are doing press right now. He's talking about the supporters, the prominent people in media, people like us, who have rightly criticized that the LA Fire Department is understaffed. They've been complaining for years about having too many white people. Adam Carolla pointed out that as a white man, he was held back for 7 years, and these policies have made it more difficult to fight these fires. Now, there is other news. A new fire erupted called the Auto Fire. The winds are picking up. It's going to get bad. So when I see this video and they're all laughing and cheering and clapping at lies, this has been the problem the whole time with the corporate press, the mainstream narrative. How do we solve the problem of these massive wildfires if the people who live in these areas don't actually know what we are saying, what the problem is?
I don't know that there is a solution on the horizon for these wildfires, because the people in positions of authority are just passing the buck. People like Jimmy Kimmel are blaming, their political opponents or people that they dislike their politics for being the problem. So I don't see a solution. I don't see how anything gets fixed. The government of California has been a single party government for at least 3 decades, probably longer. I don't know when the last time they had a genuine conservative or a person of a different political opinion, and that just leads to all kinds of terrible results for the population, regardless of which side it is, right? So if hypothetically, if it was all Republicans in one state all the time for 3 decades, you would get the same kind of falling in line and everyone just going through the same motions all the time, because that kind of ideological uniformity does nothing but breed corruption. We're getting it out of Washington right now. 4% or 5% of DC voted for Donald Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris. It's a terrible thing when you have uniformity of political opinion, because you have people that are terrified to step out of line and say, no, this is a bad policy.
Yeah, I'd play devil's advocate just a little bit on this with the one issue here, because for me, it's like about the timing a little bit, right? The insensitivity of what happened, right? So there has to be a moratorium to some degree of like horrible tragedy, horrible fire. And I fear sometimes that we all do this. We jump on narratives right away. It's like, let's just have empathy for people that are, we don't want to be rooting for this so that we can have an I told you so moment or anything along those lines. And obviously, then you look at some of the issues like, why did this happen, right? Then you start to hold the people accountable. Maybe we're at that time where we start to look at that and the different reasons, whether, there's evidence that specifically the DEI was a culprit here. I don't know that you have that. You certainly have negligence, it appears. I'm not a fire guy, so maybe, an expert can say so. I know that many firemen have spoke out previously saying, like, all we need is one win and we're screwed. I'm like, if we knew that, we knew this 6 years ago, we know this now, like, why wasn't everything being done? Like, who pays more taxes than people in California? What are you paying for?
I completely agree. I think the issue here is, I would agree incompetence plays a much bigger role than diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
They didn't fill the reservoirs. They didn't build.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is the very definition of incompetence, actually. That's where the incompetence crisis is coming from. It's coming from the insistence on affirmative action, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and programs of that kind.
New reservoirs and understaffing may have an issue. There may be DEI involved in understaffing to a degree, but the bigger picture is general mismanagement.
Yep.
In this regard, though, Jimmy Kimmel is going on like a major late night show, one of the most prominent in the country, and misrepresenting the criticism that we have, which is largely mismanagement, and then trying to make it look like not specifically me, but the people in this space and Donald Trump are angry that there's too many people who aren't white as firefighters. So largely, completely agree. I'd like to focus on how can we get relief? And so shout out to Mike Cernovich and Chef Andrew Gruel, who have been raising money, and Chef Gruel's been providing space and resources for people. And I'm not gonna rag on the guy for crying over watching his home burn, not at all, but I wanna correct the record and say this is not our criticism. It is not that we're saying people are not white. That should be called out.
Yeah,
Did Kimmel lose his house?
No.
No, okay.
I'm saying, like, this is his home. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure his favorite bagel shop doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And that's fair to be upset about. These are if I know people who live in the Palisades, they don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
I've been to parties up there. Those parties will never happen again. That scares me. I have friends who live a few miles away from where these fires are, and I'm texting them and making sure they're alive. So I get it. I gotta say the dude does cry a lot. You know what I mean? Like, as an aside.
Yeah, I mean, they don't go into a whole lot of detail, as you can see in this clip, but it is very clear that the big problem is mismanagement, absolutely. But why is there mismanagement? Mismanagement is just another word for incompetence. California has had many, many years to figure out ways to deal with these fires. And I'm sure the experts, the true experts, not the DEI experts, I'm sure the true experts have plenty of ideas. I'm sure they know what to do to deal with these fires. But of course, they're hamstrung in their efforts because they have to spend their time and resources not doing those things or doing alternative things proposed by environmentalists or, Native American activists or whatever. And those alternatives are receiving loads of resources and time, which is completely wasted, obviously. Now, you could also say that these people, it's kind of like people who live in earthquake zones or, tornado zones of the country or hurricane zones of the country. It's like whenever I see these houses being destroyed in hurricanes in Florida or wherever, I always think, well, why do you live there, for God's sake? I mean, hurricanes are a regular occurrence in certain parts of the country. Why? And I have to admit, I'm always shocked. Not only I'm shocked, I'm thinking when I see these scenes on TV or on the, when I see videos, I think, why on earth do you live there? And if you do live there, why on earth are you only leaving now? You've had the hurricane warnings come in days ahead of time. Why are you leaving now? Why don't you have a secondary location somewhere else? A little cabin in the woods or something. Why don't you have loads of extra? Or if you're going to stay in a place in the basement and hunker down, why don't you have 2 weeks worth of food and water down there or something like that? It seems to me people are woefully unprepared. And in California, in these areas where the fires are, like in the Palisades, frankly, it's a risk. Fires they've had wildfires there are nothing new. It is a risk living there. And it's an even greater risk when the fire risk is not managed. So, I mean, just by living there, it's a risk. But yeah, it's a big mess all around. Let me know what you think about this. If you have any specific knowledge of these fires or the measures which should be taken but which are not being taken, I'd be very interested to see what you have to say in the comments. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.